Good evening, my Lynn N Things family and friends. Welcome on back to the channel, guys. It's your girl here. I'm turning my volume a little bit, y'all. It might be a little quiet. So y'all know what time it is. It is story time with Lynn. Yeah, I got my shirt on, y'all. So I am so sorry I had to postpone my reading from Saturday to Sunday. So you guys will be seeing this on Sunday. My baby girl came into town, y'all. So I had to spend some family time with the baby girl while she was here for the weekend because she'll be flying back out. So I didn't get the chance to do it like I wanted to, but of course we're going to jump right in today, honey, and we're going to pick up where we left off, guys. So before we even start our reading, y'all know what time it is. It's candle time. What are we burning tonight to set our ambiance? Well, guys, I do have my hot buttered rum candle here. This is what we're going to be burning tonight. Of course, it is one of my Bath and Body Works candles. I really love this one too. This one is actually almost all gone, but we're going to just get her all lit up so we can get started and set our ambiance and get ready to read, y'all. I cannot wait. I hope you guys have been enjoying all of the readings every week. I really have been enjoying reading this beautiful woman story to you guys, or bits and pieces of it, because I do not own the rights to this, so I'm not reading every single thing, but I am trying to read like the interesting things and just things I would like for you to, to share. I like to share with you guys. So the last chapter we did, I do believe, was chapter 11. So tonight we are on chapter 12, guys. So go ahead, get all comfy, get you a drink, maybe a nice hot coffee or tea or cocoa. Although it's gotten back a little bit warm here where I am in Illinois. I don't know what's going on with the weather. I am so ready for fall, y'all. This girl is ready for like the 60s and the 70s weather. I like sweater weather. Yes, I do. Fall is my favorite time of year. So maybe you might want to go get an iced drink. However and whatever, please go ahead, get your drinks. And we're going to jump into chapter 12, which the heading of this one is called Going Natural. Thanks, guys, for stopping by. Here we go. I never set out to start a natural hair craze. On the day I showed up at Shalimar Barbershop in Harlem, I simply wanted a haircut. What came next stunned even me. The year was 1962. I was in the blacks by then and had also been asked to take a role in Between Yesterday and Today, the CBS Sunday morning drama. In a single live episode, I was to play an African wife, a woman who, once in the United States, wished to preserve her cultural heritage. The cast rehearsed the day before the show, and like many black women in those times, I was then wearing my hair relaxed. This character wouldn't have worn her hair straightened though. I kept thinking as we ran through the script, so adamant was this woman about embracing her native culture. There was no way she would have chemically processed her hair. It didn't feel right to me. So I took myself up to Shalimar's, the place where Duke Ellington used to get his hair cut. A barber greeted me and introduced himself as Streamline. "How may I help you today, miss?" he asked me. "I would like to have my hair cut," I said, "and I want it as short as you can possibly get it." The man stared at me as if I had a unibrow. "Excuse me, what do you want?" "You see my hair?" I said, pointing at it. "I want it cut. And then I would like to have it shampooed so that it goes back to its natural state." He coughed kind of. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "I'm sure," I said. He put me in his chair and draped a cape around me. He then turned on his clippers. As he proceeded to cut, I closed my eyes, mostly because I didn't want the sight of my neck-length hair to deter me from my mission. He cut 15 minutes or so before saying, "Well, how do you like it?" I flung open my eyelids. "It's not short enough," I told him. My hair then was probably about 8 inches. And he cut it down to about 5. "I want it as close to my scalp as you can get it," I told him. "Okay, miss," he muttered. "Whatever you want." The next morning for the show, I strolled onto the set with my head tied in a kerchief. I got my makeup done, my costume on, and I heard the director yell, "Places, please." Just as I walked onto the stage, I pulled off my scarf. The room stopped. By the dumbfounded look on the director's face, I was sure I was about to be fired. "Cicely," he said, walking slowly to me, "you've cut your hair." I nodded. "You know," he said, drawing in a hand, drawing in a breath, "I kind of wanted to ask you to do that, but I didn't have the nerve." My character who gave me the audacity. Anytime I have changed my hair over the years of my career, it has had nothing to do with me personally. It has always been about being authentically in character, about staying as true to her essence and appearance as I can. That has always been my sole intention. And yet, when that episode aired, all anyone could talk about was this actress who showed up on a television show with a nappy head. That was only the beginning. Within weeks of my first appearance, letters began pouring in all over the country. Hairdressers wrote to the network claiming I was impacting their business. "My clients want to have their hair cut off like the black girl on your show," they wrote. Episode after episode, the letters continued arriving by the bushels. I now wish I'd had the sense to save some of them just so I could read them again and laugh as I remembered. "This actress has all of our customers chopping off their hair," the salon owners noted. In that sense, their business was thriving. Never had there been such demand for female barbers, some said, but their earnings for chemical services gone, or at least noticeably curtailed. That is how the natural hair trend of the 1960s began. I loved wearing my hair natural. I felt beautiful with it, like the real me, which is why I continued with the style long after Eastside. It was also incredibly freeing since, for the first time in my life, I could wash and go, minus any scalp abrasions from chemicals. Maya, of course, loved my new look. "We always wore our natural hair on the road," she said, recalling earlier days when she traveled abroad with the touring company of Porgy and Bess. Overseas, no one was mixing lye or heating hot combs, so you had to wear it the way God gave it to you. The first time my daughter saw me with my fro, she gasped. She then called my mother and told her I had cut off all my hair. "What do you mean she cut off her hair?" my mom breathed into the receiver. She wouldn't be so darn foolish. She was something else, that Frederica, and certainly never one to clamp her tongue when it came to her children's choices. For a while, she wouldn't even let me come to her apartment. "You're not gonna embarrass me in front of my neighbors," she said. Who God help that woman. Over centuries, we have been taught to be ashamed. It did not begin that way, though. Our ancestors, long before they were sold from their homeland, took great pride in their appearance, of their hair. Our foremothers created the world's most ornate, intricate, and diverse hairstyles, squeezing their youngins between their thighs, swapping laughter with every braid and twist. In our communities, to be groomed was to be loved. With our mothers' hands down in our scalps, and the tenderness present in their palms, we felt cared for and connected. Hair for us was the opposite of disgrace. It represented intimacy. During the Middle Passage, our unattended locks became matted. Our rituals and unique hair tools were stolen from us. In the New Land, European traders often cut off our tresses, their cargo as we were called, the animals covered in wool and not human hair. The 1960s, for me, were filled with a spate of roles, some forgettable, others leaving an imprint. Most of the time, I was just happy to be working, bringing in a steady income to support Joan. In the years following her birth, I had a sense that I would have not have any more children, and I didn't want my child to ever go without. After leading roles in the Blacks and East Side, West Side, my first two steady income sources, I immediately took out a life insurance policy. By then, Joan had finished high school, and her passion for social justice had led her to become a mentor with a church affiliated organization based in the village. For years, she both worked and lived in that community, growing close to her fellow mentors as they together supported children. Though Joan was no longer at my side daily, I still wanted to be sure she was always financially secure. So later on, as I started earning more money, I eventually increased that policy. And if I got a per diem on a show, I would not spend it. I'd instead take my lunch to work and set aside the money for her. I was sometimes surprised at how quickly those small amounts added up. Following my Afro debut in Eastside, I had some other television firsts. In 1966, the year Miles and I began seeing one another, I got a role on Guiding Light as Martha Frazier, a registered nurse known for handing out advice to her comrades and the first black character to appear on a soap opera. I never watched Guiding Light, even after I landed the part. That wasn't the case for my mother and sister, however. They followed every single plot twist. My mother, who had loosened her entertainment is evil beliefs in favor of some daily amusement, would sit on her living room couch while shouting at the TV screen, telling so-and-so how wrong he is and to steal somebody's wife. These conversations would go on for hours. Do you hear me? And just about every time they saw me on the episode, they called me saying, "You shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that." Miles even got in on the conversation. After work, when I'd see him, he'd meet me at the door with a smirk and his input. Who do you think you are, giving these people advice? You've got some nerve on television and telling people what to do and how to do it. It's none of your business. Between hours-long sessions on his horn in the basement, he somehow also found the time to tune in to the Guiding Light. In those years, I also played Princess Amara in I Spy, the NBC series starring Bill Cosby. That's where I first met Bill. Years later, he and I co-starred in The Bill Cosby Show from 1969 to 1971, the first of two to bear his name. I portrayed Mildred Hermosa, the blind date and his first girlfriend of Bill's character, Chet. And for this role, I wore a bouffant afro wig. I'll never forget the blind date scene. The sun was out, a gorgeous day. For a costume, they had me in a full-length, colorful silk dress that hit at my hips. I had to take this long walk to get over to Bill's character. When I drew close, I walked into his arms and we kissed. Right after he'd acted it out, the sound man yelled, "Cut!" He'd heard some kind of ambient noise. He told us. We did it all over. And we heard that same thing, we had to do it again. The commotion, it turned out, was Bill's heart thumping away in his chest. In all of our years working together, he never laid a finger on me offset. But for that scene, I did get his ticker going. I got to know Bill and Camille during that era. A few months after Miles and I got together, my third eye started blinking. My sixth sense had never gone away. Since that year in my childhood when I foreseen the fire and heard whispers from my deceased aunt, I was constantly having premonitions. Much of the time, my clairvoyance showed up in the form of vivid dreams. I'd dream of someone, and then the very next hour or day, that person would either pass me on the street or show up at my door. Other times, I'd hear a voice, clear as if someone were standing in the room with me. As a child, this did not rattle me, but as I got older and the foresights came with greater frequency, they began upsetting me. With all these voices and visions, I truly started wondering what I'd gone stark raving mad. A turning point came on an evening in 1967. I was staying at a hotel in Midtown to be near whatever show I was working on at the time. My cousin, Don Shirley, had been on my mind all week, so I decided to give him a call. When I picked up the phone to dial, his voice was already on the line. "Hello, sis?" he said. It startled me so that I slammed the receiver down and began crying, upset that such occurrences always seemed to be happening to me. Moments later, I heard a knock on the door. I didn't answer. A key went into the lock, and in stepped a hotel housekeeper. "Get out, get out, get out," I yelled. "What do you want?" "Miss Tyson," she said, "somebody downstairs is trying to reach you. He said you hung up on him." I stared at her. "Who is it?" I said. "A Mr. Don Shirley," she says. "He's in the lobby. Should I send him up?" I told her first to put him on the phone from downstairs, and when he'd confirmed it was indeed him, I asked him to come up. By the time he arrived at my door, I was hysterical. "Cicely, what on earth is the matter with you?" he asked, laughing a little bit. "I think I'm losing my mind," I told him. I revealed everything, the dreams, the premonitions, the eerie experiences, like his already being on the phone when I tried to call him. My cousin, whose story was shared with the world in the movie Green Book, was not only a legendary pianist and composer, he was also a trained psychologist who'd earned his degree at the University of Chicago. He sat on the edge of the bed next to me. "Okay, listen, sis," he said. "Let me tell you something. What you have is ESP, extrasensory perception. I've never heard the term, so I gave him a puzzled stare. I believe everybody has ESP to some extent," he continued, "and a few have a more developed intuition than others. Obviously, you are very developed to be able to pick up things. Come with me. Let's take a walk." Don took me by the hand and led me through the hotel lobby and walked me over to the bookstore on the corner of 57th and 7th Avenue. He bought me several books on ESP. "Read these," he said, handing me the bag. "And if you have any questions, call me and I'll explain it to you." I scoured every page of every book he gave me, and one paragraph at a time I began to understand this gift, this strange ability I had been born with. The more I learned about it, the less frightening it seemed. Reading about it helped normalize it for me. If someone had given it a name and written an entire volume about it, this clearly wasn't something I had dreamed up. This was a known ability, and perhaps even one I could use to my benefit. A premonition I had not long after reinforced that. During the first months of my relationship with Miles, we'd grown quite close. In general, it took Miles a long time to trust others, fully let them in, but he'd opened his soul to me early on. Between Miles and me, there was never any pretense. What I saw is what I got. Miles was as true to his emotions as I was to my hair texture, and in the case of the latter, he preferred me that way. Plain and natural. No wigs, no extensions, no nothing. When Miles asked me to be on the cover of his 1967 album, Sorcerer, the Columbia team layered makeup on my face. "Wipe that crap off," he says. When he saw me, "I want you just as you are." The resulting profile image reflects me, sans foundation, exactly as he loved me. In keeping with Miles' desire for the real, he displayed the full spectrum of his emotions. I'd seen him act crazy as a loon. I'd seen him cry like a newborn. Not long before we met, he'd lost his mother. He was also still grappling with his separation from Frances. The first time I saw him in tears was in 1966. One day, when I was at his brownstone, he went out to get the mail, and when he returned, he bore an envelope and a dazed expression. Without a word, he went straight upstairs to his bedroom on one of those floors above. He stayed up there for the longest time. As I sat in the living room debating whether to go up and see about him, I just let him have his privacy. Then I finally went up. In those early days of our relationship, everyone seemed to have an opinion about Miles, and especially about why I was with him. Rude, arrogant, mean. Those are the terms others often use to describe him, as a person and as a performer. But I came to see Miles otherwise. He was always refining himself, always pushing the boundaries of what was musically possible, never settling. I eventually found out why he turned his back to the audience while on stage. Because I can hear the orchestra better, he told me. When you're downstage, he explained, the notes float directly your way. And Miles, perfectionist that he was, positioned himself to take in each measure. He cared deeply about the creation of every tone, whether it came from his own instrument or from those one of his guys. Turning his back had nothing to do with disdain or for his audience, yet in the eyes of some it made him a bad boy, a man who glorified in insulting his fans. How wrong they were. And yet, like all who walk this earth, Miles had his imperfections, one of which became abundantly clear a few months into our courtship. Miles took as much pride in his cars as he did in his dress and appearance. He drove nothing but a Ferrari or a Maserati. But back then, I'd met him when he'd been in one of his heaviest drug periods. He had lost both driver's license and the right to buy a car in his own name. So one afternoon, Miles, who knew I did not drive, said to me, "I want to buy you a car." "For what?" I asked. "There must be something about this face of mine that makes people think I'm stupid." "I just think we should have a car," he insisted, "and we can put it in your name." I thought, well, if you want a new car, I told him, you can put it in your own name. I'm not going to be the one driving it. Somehow, over the next few weeks, he had managed to get himself both a license and a car, probably through his managers. He told me it was to be delivered at some point during the following month, but he did not mention the make and model of the car, nor did he know precisely when it would arrive. A few days later, I was walking around Midtown when, in my mind's eye, I saw Miles in a white Ferrari, top down, speeding up 7th Avenue in Harlem. Next to him was a fair-skinned black woman with her hair blowing in the wind. I found my way over to a phone booth, fished out a dime from my pocketbook, slid it into the slot, and I called Miles at his house. He answered. "Oh," I said, "so you got the car today?" Silence. Miles, not yet aware of my sixth sense, often swore to God that I had a detective spying on him. "Why don't you stop hiring people to follow me around?" he yelled. Frankly, I didn't need to hire anyone. He almost always gave himself away with his reactions. That time, his silence told me that I had hit a nerve. "Do you hear me?" I said again. "I see you got your car today." "Where are you?" he asked. "I'm on 6th Avenue and 42nd, I told him. "Meet me at the house," he said, and hung up. When I arrived, he was sitting on the windowsill in the living room. "Come here, darling," he said, drawing me into his arms. "So where were you today?" "I was just out and about, doing a little shopping," I said. "How did you know I got the car?" he asked. "A friend of mine told me she saw you driving up 7th Avenue with a white Ferrari and the top down," I said. He kind of stiffened and loosened his embrace. I hadn't even mentioned the girl that I had seen in my vision, yet his body language told me everything I needed to know. "What friend?" he said, anger in his tone. "What's her name?" His fury rattled me, which is why I made up a fake name. "Tina." "Where does Tina live?" he pressed. I had an aunt-in-law who then had an apartment on St. Nicholas Avenue in Harlem, and in my fluster, I gave him her address. "I'm going out for a few minutes," he told me. "I'll be back." I'm sure Miles must have gone straight to Harlem. I'm almost sure of that. If he turned up at my aunt's address and asked for Tina, and I never even heard that he did so, No one there would have answered to that name. All I can be certain of is that he'd indeed gotten his Ferrari that day, and that he didn't return until hours later. We never discussed where he had been, nor did I ever tell him about the woman I saw in my head. I forgot all about it, my vision, until years later. That very woman turned up. I didn't need a vision to confirm Miles's tendencies. There was real world evidence. He once claimed that he had to drive out to Long Island for a dental appointment at 8 o'clock in the evening. What kind of dentist takes patients at this hour? I asked dubiously as he darted out the front door. He shrugged and left. It was a nice summer evening, and soon after he'd gone, I went for a walk. Miles always kept his cars parked in a garage on Riverside near his place. As I made my way down 79th Street, who did I see pulling out of that garage? Miles Davis. Next to him was a young white woman. I wish I had a photograph of the shock on that man's face. I just swirled around and marched back to the house. He later came in saying something or other about the woman being a friend that he knew through a friend. I guess she must have needed dental work on Long Island as well. I spoke not a word to Miles. As far as I was concerned, there was nothing else to discuss. What could he have said to change what I had witnessed with my own eyes? Not a thing. We were living together then, but I had never given up my place on 74th. After listening to his explanation, I went back to my apartment, got in my bed, and fell asleep. When he called me a while later, I didn't even answer, nor for days after. I felt deceived and hurt. Most of all, he lied to me. Children lie out of fear. They will be punished in some way. But adults, as I see it, have no right to lie. If you do something wrong, just fess up and say, I did it, I'm sorry. Or, you did it and you're not sorry. Sooner or later, the truth will come out. And it's the deceit for me can be as damaging as the offense. If he wanted to traipse around downtown with some white woman, so be it. I had no right to stop him, but I also didn't need to stay around and watch him do his dirt. Miles and I did not argue about the woman I caught him with, or anything else during those years. I detested arguments. I grew up in a home fraught with them, and the palpable tension that they create. When my father pounded home after his nights out on the town, he and my mom went at it, forcefully enough to draw me wailing from my bed. So, when I was upset at Miles, he could not drag a solitary word from my lips. That made him even more furious. He wanted to provoke an argument with me to ease his conscience. But if I had let him draw me into his wrath, it would not have ended well. The years ahead would prove that. When I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a response, he'd blow off steam by boxing. He had a punching bag in his backyard, and he'd be out there for hours, grunting and swinging like he was Joe Louis. And then there were the drugs. He did not use in front of me. In fact, in all my years with Miles, never once did he shoot up, snort cocaine, or even smoke anything in my presence. I'm sure Miles must have shot up or snorted in his bathroom, but he left no sign of it, clearing away any paraphernalia. He knew how much I despised drugs. Also, my religious upbringing ensured that I had nothing to do with them, and I still don't. One night, after Miles had played at a club in Midtown, he and I, along with some of his band members, drove uptown toward his place. One of the guys lifted a small bag, presumably filled with drugs, and offered it to me. Miles pushed it away. Man, are you kidding? He said, laughing. I can't even get Cicely to smoke a cigarette. Yet that didn't stop him from getting his fixes privately. On many other evenings when we were on our way home, he'd pull up and park at a building near 82nd in Amsterdam, then a known dope house. I'll be out in a few minutes, he'd say. I might even be naive about drugs, but I came to recognize that dazed and faraway look in his eyes whenever he stumbled out of that building. "I'll be out in a few" became my cue to take a cab home. I wasn't crazy enough to sit in his car and wait for him to drive me home in that state. "Why didn't you wait for me?" He'd come through the door, slurring. "I was tired of sitting in the car," I told him. Whatever he smoked or shot up, he usually reeked of it. I knew the scent of marijuana, but other than that, I couldn't tell the difference between coke or heroin or any other drug. On many occasions, he emitted a distinctly powerful scent, like the smell of burnt iron. It permeated his pores. He tried to cover it with cologne. He loved his little collection, but I could still smell it. And when I did, I stayed as far away from him as I could because I knew I wouldn't have been talking to Miles anymore. I'd be having a conversation with a person he became when a substance had taken him over. The drugs, the wandering eye, the outburst. I dealt with it by not engaging it. I suppose it was my way of reconciling the Miles that I knew, the porous soul bearing a hurt-filled past, with the Miles he became in quelling his pain. After I'd been mute for a while following the white woman sighting, Miles apologized the way he always did, by showering me with gifts. It was his way of attempting to win me back. Down on 57th Street was a woman's clothing store, a haberdashery that Miles knew I loved. He'd go in there and buy a whole rack of dresses for me, and he couldn't find enough jewelry and flowers to present to me. On many occasions over the years, my place would be filled with so many peonies and roses and lilacs and hydrangeas that you would have thought someone had just passed. I kept the clothes but never wore them, and I let the flowers die in their vases. My affections could not be bought, and I wanted Miles to understand that. Most of the time I did not even acknowledge his gifts, which drove him insane. And yet his presence, along with his pleas for me to return to him, and his promises that he would sit up straight, did eventually kind of soften me. I could have left Miles. He clearly had his sharp edges, jagged shards that pierced and injured me, and at times drove me away. And yet I looked up from my own agony and over at him. There stood a man who did not care whether he lived or died. Beneath his so-called bad boy exterior, I saw a man who was ill at his core, a tormented soul who used drugs to anesthetize his sorrows. When people attempt to destroy themselves, even if unconsciously, they have a hand grip on a knife. Make no mistake, self-injury is a statement regarding one's own worth as its glaring lack. Miles played fast and loose with his life far too frequently to have known his value. And even while grappling with my own anguish, I could not stand by and watch this man waste the rare gift he came here to share. His behavior at times disturbed me greatly, even humiliated me. And yet, more than anger, I felt compassion and pity for his sad state. It is possible to be at once hurt by a man and heartbroken for him. I could not allow Miles to throw himself away. The loss I felt would have been too great for me and for the world. Okay, guys, that is chapter 12. Whoa, a lot went on in that chapter. We got to know her and some things about her and Miles. And one thing I have to tell you guys, as much as I love Cicely, I never knew she was with Miles Davis. I don't know why I didn't know that, but I didn't. So as always, please put down in the comments your commentary, your thoughts, things that may have come to mind for you. And did you know that? Because I did not know that. And thank you guys so much for waiting an extra day to hear our next installment. Hopefully everything should be on track for next Saturday, and we will be into chapter 13. If you guys like this, please go ahead, hit that like. That really does help the channel. And if you know anybody else who is interested in these readings, I will try to put in an iCard, add this one as well to the playlist, so they can go back and hear all of the chapters that have already been read. I have so enjoyed you guys. Thank you so much. Till our next video, guys.